Hello, everyone. It's Phil Likes Fights, the host that you love the most. I'm sure someone's used that line before, but welcome back. Hey, episode 2 of the podcast. Took a little week intermission. I really wanted to reflect on some things, look at what I did good, look at what I did bad, and that does mean that I missed a week. I'm going to try to wrap it all up pretty succinctly in the first part of the show before moving on to what happened this past weekend. It is, of course, St. Patrick's Day, so happy to everyone that celebrates St. Patrick's Day. I myself am Irish. I'm going to celebrate after I record this, but for right now, that's the matter at hand. So we're going to cover the events of the past few days, and then, of course, look ahead to this upcoming weekend. There's a lot of good fights, a sort of underrated boxing schedule to cover, so I look forward to covering that for you all today. But without further ado, let's get into it. Of course, we saw the return of Keith Thurman against Brock Jarvis. Again, of course, I'm covering late news, but I did pick, however, that Thurman was going to win by KO in the 9th. I wanted to go over what I was thinking with my predictions, where I went right, where I went wrong, and sort of move on from there. So instead of getting a KO in the 9th, he went full steam ahead, found that knockout, I believe, in the 3rd round, and I saw a lot of people saying that Thurman is older. Not that necessarily he would lose, but, you get older, your legs get slower, and maybe Jarvis would see some sort of decision. I didn't see that at all. If you've seen Jarvis fight before, beyond just his Liam Paro fight, you know that sadly he just doesn't have the chin to hold up at this sort of level. And I still think Keith Thurman is really viable as a contender in this division. Of course, 154 right now is a shark tank, but he's a big name. They're clearly setting up the Tim Tszyu fight. And I think that if Tim Tszyu comes through against Joey Spencer upcoming in a few weeks from now, that's a perfect next fight. No complaints whatsoever. So good win by Keith Thurman. Also on the card, I picked Zarafa by decision. He found the late knockout, so good on him. Again, another fun contender in this 154, 160 pound division. Good performance by him. My guy, Tonga, man. I thought Kira Rustin was the better amateur. I thought he was the more clean cut fighter. But when I found out that he was turning around on nearly a week's notice to take this fight, I had to pick against him. I don't pick fighters that come in on such short notice. On top of that, I didn't realize that Tonga is small, really small for light heavyweight. They said on the broadcast he's going to super middle. I 100% agree. And finally, Mateo Tapia, UD, again, found that knockout, but early on, Sergey Vorobyev made it a competitive fight, a fun fight, and I figured that their past history that they had with sparring maybe would lead to a decision, but good on Tapia to bounce back from that Savadra, not loss, obviously, because he did ultimately escape that fight with the draw, but that's a performance where you're taking a ton of damage, so good bounce back win. Sergey Vorobyev is respectable. And again, this is that 154, 160 pound division. Good on him, but I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Also, one of the best fights of 2025 happened in that flyweight unification between Teraji and Akui, and I had picked Teraji to win by KO in the 7th. But no, Akui up on the cards by a round going into that 12th round got stopped. What a knockout by Teraji. He's a special fighter. He's finally on the pound for pound list. We had to wait years and years for him to finally get acknowledged as a pound for pound talent. Yes, he is in all out wars and action fights. He does have to sometimes gut it out in a 12th round knockout, but he keeps doing it over and over and over again, to the point where if it's happening so consistently, maybe it really is because he is that game, that clutch. You hear this a lot in other sports, that clutch gene. Teraji has the clutch gene, that ability to, no matter what position he's in, find that win. Great fight. Akui, who already was living that Cinderella story, never really should have even become world champion most times in a position that he was in, but great run by him. I hope if he wants to keep fighting, I'm there to watch all day because, again, you came up just short, a round short against Teraji. I also wanted to comment briefly on that stoppage. I thought it was bad in real time, but the fact that Akui basically dropped down to his knees, had to be, I think, hospitalized at the very least. I didn't realize just how much damage he was taking in that moment. And good stoppage by the referee, but I do think that wins the award for worst looking good stoppage of all time. Also, you got to cut me a little slack here. All week I was hearing Olasquaga by knockout, that he's too young, too fresh. Koyaguchi, coming off of the back and forth fights with Vince Paras. I thought Koyaguchi had just enough craft, just enough ability, where Olasquaga, again, is 10 fights in his pro career, or less than that, but still did not have anywhere near the experience of Koyaguchi. I thought Koyaguchi won clear in this fight, but they gave it to Olasquaga. Ridiculous cards, but he retains the title. But man, Koyaguchi, the fact that he got robbed against Vince Paras, almost contemplated retirement, by the way, then had the trilogy with Paras, won that just as clear as he did in the second fight, got himself into a title shot against Olasquaga and came up short again. It just seems like some guys in boxing always get the raw end of the deal. But good performance by both. Again, this wasn't a blowout. This wasn't a domination, but I thought there was one clear winner, and it wasn't Olasquaga. Finally, I thought Iwata would beat Rene Santiago, but apparently he spent too much time glazing Gervonta Davis on Twitter. I don't know if you guys are keeping up with that whole escapade, but apparently, Iwata, your lifestyle is fire, no cap, but you're not world champion, so very flat performance by him. I was expecting a lot more. But I did say by unanimous decision because Santiago's tough and much better than his record indicates. All right, let's move on here to fights over the past weekend. It was the return of Austin Amma Williams taking on Patrice Volny, and I did doubt Amma Williams in this fight. I know I didn't get to put up my predictions here, but I'm going to tell you what I thought. We're going to go into it. Take my word as you will. I was picking Patrice Volny either by late round stoppage. I was thinking 10 or 11th round, and if not, just clear-cut unanimous decision. And the fight basically went as I thought, where, again, Volny, like a Hamza Shiraz, high guard, long, lanky. I was really thinking that those attributes were going to be a kryptonite for Amma Williams. The real difference was, and even I can admit this, even though the fight came down to the final rounds, really, this was a close, competitive fight, but Amma just outworked him and out-hustled. And I'm not a big advocate for, he was the aggressor, he was throwing more. I don't typically like that. I like clean, effective aggression, clean work. But again, you can't, if you're going to leave this in the hands of the judges, don't leave it to where you're getting outthrown at a 3-1 clip. Why are you putting yourself in that position? If you're going to do that, you have to make sure that the work you're landing is perfect work, where you're getting visible damage. You're clearly hurting your opponent. And Volny was not doing that. I think Volny just got a little bit too tired down the stretch, which I was surprised at, considering he has a pretty good gas tank from the fights I've seen of him. But again, credit to Amma Williams. I thought this was a really tough test, one I didn't think he would pass. And my thoughts on him now as a title challenger in this division has gone up. Obviously, we've seen Hamza Shiraz leaving the division. Carlos Adames is a title holder. Lara is a title holder. It looks like, based on what Eddie Hearn had said post-fight, that they want to make Amma Williams against Shane Mosley Jr. Both men, I believe, are highly ranked in the WBA. And now the fact that Shiraz has lost to Carlos Adames means that apparently the plan was, let me backtrack. Apparently the plan was, assuming that Shiraz would beat Carlos Adames, they wanted to make Shiraz versus Arislandi Lara for both titles. Now that Shiraz is permanently moving to 168, Lara is left without a dance partner. I don't think PBC is looking to put a lot more money into him to keep him on their shows. At this point, he's in his 40s. I say you go Amma Williams, 5 months' time, Shane Mosley Jr. fight. Assuming he wins that, you do Lara at the end of the year. Lara's older. He's not going to want to take a tune-up out in the meantime. He's going to want to sit out. And you could have Amma Williams as a champion by the end of the year, and that's not unrealistic. I really thought that Volny would be a step too much, but Ammo just proved that he wanted to win more, and that's not really something that's technical. That's not a thing that you can really show by statistics, but it's heart and it's admirable. It really is. It's admirable to see someone that just wanted the win more than the other guy, and that's really what got him over the finish line. Just consistently throwing in good combinations. 1-2 uppercut, throwing an uppercut into a hook. Good stuff. I liked what he was going for, and even though Volny was catching so much of it on the glove, again, they showed the statistics, and I believe Emma Williams was being kept to 6% on his thrown jabs, only landing 6%. That's absurdly low. But again, if it's 6% of 200 plus jabs, you're landing at a pretty good rate. You're landing 40, 50 jabs over time. So good stuff, good fight all around. I was entertained. Now let's get to this co-main event here. Edgar Berlanga, who took on Jonathan Gonzalez-Ortiz. Of course, Gonzalez-Ortiz was a man that was a welterweight prospect on Gennady Golovkin undercards back in the day, back in HBO boxing days, and had served a 10-year jail sentence for armed robbery, came back last year against two overmatched opponents, worked up some wins, but again, this was not going to be a close fight for Edgar Berlanga. Credit to him for getting the first round knockout. I really think that that's what he needed. I think even if this went to a second round, there'd be a lot of discussion about you couldn't get this guy out of there in one round. What are you doing? Of course, Ortiz came into this fight flabby. He's not a 168 pounder. He's not a 160 pounder, if we're being all honest here. But when you have a shiny record like that, 20-0-1, it can get you into a big opportunity. I think we've seen that whoever's doing the matchmaking for Matchroom's USA division is clearly scouting these guys that have had undefeated records but are sitting on the sideline. I don't think that this is necessarily a proper comparison, but we saw Sean McCallman for Diego Pacheco. We saw, who fought Conor Benn? And then he fought later on Peter Dobson. You see that there are these American fighters, even Steven Nelson, not so much, again, because he was a much more legitimate contender. I'm not comparing these on a skill level. I'm just saying it seems as though Matchroom USA are finding these Americans, or in this case, Puerto Ricans, but still North American fighters with shiny sterling records and putting them on their cards. It's pretty consistent. And good on Berlanga. But where does Berlanga go from here? I think that is the big picture. We know where Amma Williams, I don't know why I keep saying that. Amma Williams, we know where he's going from here. But what about Berlanga? We have to see. We really have to see if he re-signs Eddie Hearn. My guess is no. Look, he showed Eddie Hearn some congratulations at the end of the fight. He didn't exactly speak bad on Hearn in the fight, but there are other interviews going around saying that, this show is too small for him. He's a superstar. And he's clearly, every name he's listing, besides Jaime Munguia, Caleb Plant, Jamal Charlo, these are all PBC names. It's clear that he already had a taste of working with the PBC in the Canelo fight. I think he goes to PBC. I really do. I think that they have a lot to offer him. He's a big enough name, relatively speaking. And he wants that Caleb Plant fight desperately. And the best way to make it is to go to PBC. I saw an interview with Eddie Hearn claiming that if Plant really wants to fight with Berlanga, that Berlanga should sign with Eddie because he can get him the best deal. Ultimately, I think working in-house is going to be better than anything else. And also on this card, we saw Omari Jones make a successful pro debut against the Italian with a decent record, 14-5. That's a respectable opponent for a debutant. Got him out of there. Good job on him. Eddie Hearn claims he's the next superstar. I mean, we have to wait and see, but Omari Jones is already going to be back April 12th on the Boots Imantas Stanionis card. So looking forward to that. All right, let's move on here. We also had, over the weekend, Nick Ball taking on TJ Doheny for, of course, his WBA title. Nick Ball ultimately wins by knockout in later rounds. It was interesting of a performance. Clearly, I think a lot of this talk this week has been about a future matchup between Inoue and Nick Ball. Inoue, of course, making his undisputed title defense coming up in this May in Las Vegas against Ramon Cardenas. But there's been talk now for a few years about when will Inoue move up to 126 pounds? Will he fight a title holder in his debut, which I do think is more likely than not. And Nick Ball is not exactly the biggest featherweight. I think Nick Ball is sort of ideal for a dip in the waters at 126. And I think that the reason why they chose Doheny as an opponent is, again, link him with Inoue, make those comparisons. Of course, Nick Ball, in wanting to seem superior, ultimately sort of can't claim that, in the fact that Doheny went more rounds with him than Inoue. But you can still draw those comparisons. You can say, look, they're fighting the same opponents. You got to match them up in the end. And Nick Ball did not look great in this fight, if I'm being honest. I think he let Doheny... Again, Doheny is awkward, good boxer, good feet, really good feet, I think. Ultimately, Nick Ball was expected to come out here and put a beating on a 38-year-old 122-pounder, if we're being honest on what the narrative was. I do respect Doheny. He was on a really great run before the Inoue fight. But when you're at the point of Nick Ball, when you're making these claims about fighting Inoue, you have a certain level of expectation that you're supposed to reach. And ultimately, I think most of the timeline on Twitter, social media clips, most people did not watch that performance and think he stood a chance against Inoue. So if that fight does come to pass, I'm picking Inoue. I think the public at large is picking Inoue. I think Ball is one of his real claims to fame. If you were watching him on the come up before he became world champion, he was known for having this unstoppable engine. And I think that sort of faded a little bit. I don't know. I didn't see Ball, as the rounds went on, get increasingly and increasingly more dynamic and explosive. I really think that he sort of plateaued in this fight, which is something new from him. But again, Doheny, in rounds that he won based off of boxing, not really hurting Ball. And ultimately, it was a dominant win, but I don't think it inspires a lot of confidence for those that were thinking Ball could be the man to upset Inoue. A brief thing I want to touch on here, as an aside, I'm leaving this till the end of the Ball discussion, but I'm tired of old referees. Can we just have an aside here? I'm tired of referees that don't want to do their job. They don't want to do it. You see from commission to commission, whether it's Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach, whether it's Nick Ball versus TJ Doheny, I don't know what's going on, but right now there is a serious problem with refereeing in the public at large. For so many years, we've constantly scapegoated judging. We need to do something about the judges. We need to do something about the scoring criteria. We've constantly heard all of this talk about judging. I think that the biggest problem is refereeing. Think about this from a practical standpoint. If you disagree, hear me out momentarily. When a judge is judging a fight, they are not influencing the events of the fight, right? They're sitting there observing what is happening and making a determination. Which fighter won which round? Who did I like? Did I like the aggressor? Did I like the counterpuncher? They make all these determinations that ultimately results in who wins and who loses. That is true. But the referee, the idea of a referee is to have a third man in the ring that is policing the action, that is acting as an enforcer of the rules. You know, there's a phrase out there in political science that the only things which are illegal are the ones which are enforced. So, for example, if you live in a society and you say littering is illegal, right? You can't litter. You can't take your garbage, throw it on the ground. But let's say someone does it and there's no one there to give them a fine or a ticket. Well, then how is that illegal? And if 3 other people do it and then 100 other people do it, if you have mass littering all over the place and there's no one there to enforce any of the fines, to put any of those people in jail or what have you, then it's legal. Same thing here. If taking a knee to get a break isn't enforced, if going to your corner in the middle of a fight is not enforced with points taken, disqualifications, if you can kick your opponent at the end of a round, like what happened here with Nick Ball and TJ Doheny, kicking, this is boxing. You want to kick, go to the Netherlands, learn how to speak Dutch, find Rico Verhoeven, and learn how to kickbox. But if you don't want to do that, then don't kick your opponent ever. And if you do kick your opponent, you can get disqualified, you can get a point taken. I would even take multiple points. This is not something like a headbutt or an eye poke or a groin shot, which are all in the realm of moving your head, moving your arms. If you kick your opponent, you are using your legs, which in boxing are designed for one thing: movement, getting in, getting out, moving. And you are using it to inflict damage on your opponent. That is a point taken. What does the referee do? He says, hey, both of you guys, I want a clean fight. I'm going to take the most middleman fence-sitting position of all time, and I'm not going to do my job, which is to enforce the rules, which is to take points to affect the scoring. I'm not going to do any of that. Instead, I'm going to sit here and pretend that both you guys are fouling. Knock it off. You cannot kick your opponent ever. But again, we're in an epidemic of referees that don't want to do their job. Again, you see this in the UFC too. So this isn't necessarily a boxing only sort of thing, but it is a problem. There's some sort of problem in referee culture right now. I don't know if we need more seminars, if we need to just stop having referees that are clearly above a certain age threshold. Do we need younger referees that maybe have less experience but more drive? Again, a younger, hungrier referee, I really think, would be one that could stand there and say, hold on, Nick Ball, I don't care that you're in your hometown right now. I don't care that you're the A side, or whatever else they might be thinking. Or a lot of these referees, by the way, who have been around forever, you start to get to know people. Hey, Nick Ball, he's a nice guy. He didn't really mean to kick him. I don't want any of that. You kick your opponent, you get a point taken at minimum. If Nick Ball kicked Doheny falls over, and the referee just disqualified him, I would have no problem with that. Genuinely speaking, because you cannot do these things. They are illegal. They are improper conduct. It's bad sportsmanship. It's inflicting pain to your enemy after the round. It's all kinds of fouls. But again, no point taken, nothing. Just brief comments. Completely ridiculous. I'm not going to push the point anymore. Hopefully you enjoyed that rant, because it seems like on each one of these podcasts, I'm going to go off on some kind of rant, but ridiculous conduct. Rest of this card, you saw Brad Strand get upset by Inoue Baluta, and man, that Romanian, he is making bank on beating all of these Brits, man. Constantly, all the time. He had that win, right, over Dennis McCann. Now he's beat Brad Strand. He's just going through that British domestic scene at 122 pounds, and he's constantly beating these guys. It's hilarious to watch. Now, I know a lot of people cried robbery, and they cried that no chance Baluta won. Look, at the end of the day, maybe Brad Strand was supposed to be the winner of that by a round or so, but this wasn't some kind of dominant win, and I don't think you can make it that close and complain, especially much like the Emma Williams fight. It was Baluta who was constantly doing more, throwing more, and I think that the judges just appreciated that. We also saw in Kane versus Charlie Edwards, I was thinking maybe Charlie Edwards was going to win this fight. Ultimately, he decided to fight on the back foot the whole night, barely threw any punches of note, and decided that he'd rather lose by wide decision than try to win and maybe get knocked out. I really think that was the overall narrative of the night. There was some other good fights in this card. There was this young kid that Dev Sani of Queensberry Promotions described as the new Edwin Valero, which was hilarious. You can find that on Twitter. You can also find me on Twitter at PhilXFights. No, I'm not going to do that. Let's move on here. Overall, a fine card, but nothing too crazy. Okay. Here we go. This is why I have the show. This is why I love to do this. Here it is, everyone's hopefully future, if not your current favorite segment of the Phil Likes Fights podcast. Who's that boxer? Do you know him? Do you love him? Do you know who this is? Because this, my friends, is the one, the only, Dewan Calloway, 409 pounds of heavyweight action. Okay, let's get into this because, man, oh man, highlight of the week. Absolutely not even a second choice. So yesterday we saw the Hollywood Fight Nights card between King Callum Walsh and his opponent Dean Sutherland of Scotland. And on that undercard, you saw the undefeated Irish heavyweight Thomas No Party Carty taking on Dewan Calloway. And I've been telling people, there's I think a tweet or a DM when this fight first got announced. I was like, Dewan Calloway's going to win that, man. I just think he's going to win. I've seen him fight before. I saw him on that top rank undercard against that gigantic heavyweight who was like 6'9". I've seen him fight. I saw his previous fight, his tune-up bout against Wyllie Jake Jr., who was a guy that Richard Torres had fought. And I was like, he's actually not the worst fighter in the world. And Thomas Carty, if you've seen him on the Matchroom shows on Before the Bell, yeah, there's a reason that he's not on those shows anymore. And he got picked up by Hollywood Fight Nights because he's put on some real stinkers. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy, Thomas Carty, he trains with like not the best team in the world. He wasn't the best amateur. Yeah, he's got the better record, but I don't know. Calloway just might be too big. He's 409 pounds. It's insane. Like 409 pounds. And he's not even like, oh, well, he's 7 foot tall. So, 409 pounds. He's just massive. And what happened in the fight was it was a couple of close early cagey rounds. I think Carty did hit Calloway with a nice shot. Calloway proceeded to bust up the nose of Carty, which nobody mentions. Carty's nose got hurt really bad. And then he got hit with another, I believe it was a right hand, decided to clinch. Calloway decided, would I rather be, I don't know, on the back foot at range, jabbing Calloway from a distance? No, let me get up close and personal with Calloway. In the second, this is going to sound like a joke if you haven't seen this. I implore you, go to the UFC Fight Bash Twitter or go to my Twitter where I responded to all their videos. You can see it there, clear as day. Literally within seconds of getting into the clinch with Dewan Calloway, his knee buckles. And people go, oh, that was an accident. Oh, how is this not a no contest? That was the biggest fluke injury of all time. You made a choice to grab onto a 409-pound man, let him lean all over you, and then you were surprised that your knee exploded? He's 409 pounds. He's bigger than Tyson Fury. He's bigger than, out of the ring, out of shape, drug using Tyson Fury. He's 409 pounds. I know I keep saying that, but he's massive. And you're going to clinch with him? Yeah, no wonder your knee exploded. I mean, look, credit to Thomas Carty. He got back up. He got back on the workhorse. He tried to find a way to win. But ultimately, Calloway saw his injured opponent in front of him. Carty made it out of the round, but that was a TKO due to injury, which was caused by Calloway, I think, pretty clearly. And I really got to find the receipt. I wish I did the show last week to say that I was picking Calloway. I hate not having receipts. I love having receipts and big time upsets like this. Carty, by the way, minus 2,000. Minus 2,000. So credit to Calloway. By the way, while I'm on this point, I did want to give a brief shout out to Muzamiru Kakande, who fought last week and got my upset of the week last week against Dan Toward with a 5th round KO. And he actually followed me on Twitter. So that's pretty cool. So I wanted to give a brief shout out to that while I'm on the Who's That Boxer card here. But I'm going to move on. Let's talk about Callum Walsh, who won. Yay, the main event, I guess. But joking aside, crazy knockout. First round knockout. Again, as you can see here, as I've highlighted, Dean Sutherland got stretched out. He looked like he was on a crucifixion here. crazy knockout by Callum Walsh. And is he going to be the face of this new TKO Boxing League, which I was going to talk about last week? I'm going to have a brief segment on it after I'm done talking about this fight right here. But I really think he's growing into his own. Now, because I watch everything, as you know, I'm the guy who likes fights. I'm Phil. Phil likes fights. That's my whole shtick. I've been watching Callum Walsh since he was 3-0, 4-0, whenever they've been putting him on these cards. And I got to tell you guys, if you saw him 5 or 6 fights ago, this is not the same guy. He was struggling with these fringe American contenders and all this stuff, and he was not like this. He did not have this dynamic one-punch explosions. Yes, he was getting knockouts early on against overmatched opponents, but his last 3 fights, Wyllie, then he fought the guy from Poland, and now Dean Sutherland. That's a pretty good 3-fight stretch for a kid that I didn't think maybe was all that. Another thing I want to bring up here, if you're wondering, well, what's the screenshot for? Look, the reason why I bring up face of TKO Boxing, here's a guy, Mac Malley, who's a big UFC tweeter, I guess if you want to say that, constantly talking about the UFC cards. And hey, he doesn't care about boxing at all, but now he's talking about, dude, King Callum Walsh is a monster. Don't even think he got touched. Dana knows how to pick him. Wow, amazing that you thought that. I wonder if Callum Walsh was fighting on a Mick Conlan undercard, if you'd be talking about how King Callum Walsh is a monster. It's almost like anything Dana White does, you're going to go, wow, this is amazing. And look, I think he's good. I think Callum Walsh is good, training with one of the all-time best coaches we've ever seen. Like, he's good. He's good. I think that in a perfect next step up for him is actually Brian Mendoza. I wanted to throw that in there. Let me know, if you're going to comment anything at all, let me know what you think about King Callum Walsh versus Brian Mendoza. I have 3 bullet points for you as to why that's a perfect next fight. 1, as I'm going to get to, Sebastian Fundora is fighting upcoming this weekend. He's a unified world champion. Brian Mendoza knocked him out. If you really want to promote this kid, Callum Walsh, you match him up against Brian Mendoza, you say, look, Callum Walsh, let's say, knocks him out. He knocked out a guy who knocked out the unified world champion. That's a selling point. 2, we've already seen that Tom Loeffler has worked with the likes of Brian Mendoza when his other fighter, Serhii Boachuk, fought him on a PBC undercard. So you have that. My 3rd bullet point is that we don't really know where Brian Mendoza's at. I think he's taken quite a bit of damage recently, but he is, I'd say, fringe top 15 in a loaded 154-pound division. And ultimately, you really get to see a proper measuring stick of where Callum Walsh is at. So that's why I think that's the next fight to make. I think it's perfect matchmaking. If it happens, I'm taking all the credit for it, by the way. But is he the face of TKO Boxing? I think so. Now, a lot of people have thought of this TKO deal, and let me just move on the graphic here. This TKO deal, you have Ring Magazine, which is, of course, owned by Turki Al-Sheikh. You have Sella, which is the Saudi investment firm, and TKO Global, which is the large conglomerate which owns the UFC, WWE. A lot of people seem to think that TKO Boxing is going to be this thing where they come in and they say, hey, Canelo, we're going to buy you. Hey, Terrence Crawford, we buy you as well. We're going to spend all this money and buy all you up. That's not what's going to happen. Callum Walsh is TKO Boxing perfectly summarized. You're going to get these young, up-and-coming fighters, and you're going to say, hey, up-and-coming fighter, do you want to fight nobodies at, your call or the MGM Grand on a Wednesday night? Is this where you want to fight? Or we can get you a good TV slot. We can get you more money. Because keep in mind, when you're young, up-and-coming, you're not making 5 figures per fight, not unless you have a really good team behind you or you're some kind of Olympian. So that UFC model of $12,500, if you go to a young boxer, you say, hey, you want 25 grand to fight? Because we're so massive, we're going to offer you 3 to 4 fight dates per year. And not only that, you get to use our UFC PI facility, which is thousands of dollars worth of maintenance and care and food and all of this stuff that I've heard. you want to lump all of that together and give that to a young fighter? Or, hey, you want to go fight at the Marv Nations promotion show, which is going to be televised on Fight TV that 5 people are going to watch realistically. If I'm a young fighter, I'm going to be all over that kind of deal. That's where TKO is going to happen. They're a massive multinational conglomerate. You really think that they're worried about promoting Canelo versus Terence Crawford? Sure, that's the big hot ticket of right now. Is that going to be the big hot ticket of 5, 10, 20 years from now? Of course not. That's one fight. That's not driving a market. If you want to control a market, you go from the bottom up. You go, hey, you, and you, all of you Olympians, we want to sign you for this amount of money. Hey, let's go to all these mega gyms throughout the country, and we're going to say, hey, any of you young up-and-coming fighters, you had a good amateur record, boom, we're going to offer you 30 grand a fight. That's how you do it. You don't do it by coming in and saying, hey, Inoue, we want to have exclusive rights to you, and we're going to put you in our league or whatever. I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think this is a long game play, and in that sense, Callum Walsh is the perfect embodiment of what a TKO fighter is going to be before they have the ability to go, hey, we own all the belts, or maybe we just have our one belt. That's what I think TKO is going to be. Callum Walsh is exemplary of that. But let's move on ever so slightly here. I did want to, okay, here it is. I'm going to go over this very briefly. I wish I had more time when this was more timely, but this is what they put out. And I'm going to just go over this quote by Mark Shapiro, who's the president and chief operating officer of TKO, who said, "This is a strategic opportunity to reimagine the sport of boxing globally. TKO has the deep expertise, promotional prowess, and long-standing relationships. HE, His Excellency, Turki Al-Sheikh, and Sela share a passion and vision for evolving the current model. Together, we can bring the sweet science back to its rightful place in the forefront of the global sports ecosystem." Okay. For all of the people that thought that this isn't some kind of long play to take over boxing, and no, they just want to be their own kind of launch of new boxing promotion. They're not looking to play tit for tat with the other promoters and, hey guys, I'm just going to be this, new guy, new fish in the pond, let's say. No, they're looking to take all the fish out of the pond and then just be in the pond alone. That's what they want down the line. It's clear by how they operate with the UFC that there's no real competition in them. I think it's kind of clear with what they're doing with WWE. I have no interest in pro wrestling. Again, I think it's a bunch of showmanship, whatever. But as I do understand, they are making aggressive pushes there as well. They want to be in control of these things. They want TKO Global and TKO Holdings Group and all this stuff, Group Holdings. Holdings Group sounds better. They should change that. But in any case, they want to be the one and only, which is why it's important to stress that they're saying to reimagine the sport of boxing globally. Reimagine. So that's saying, hey, even Dana White was making comments. Oh, we don't want WBC or WBA to be in front of world champion. We just want it to be your world champion, so you're world champion. That's what they want. They want one title. And as you know, or maybe you don't, the whole point of the Muhammad Ali Act is that the promoter, the person who is putting on the fights, can't also be the title holders or the people, the sanctioning bodies. Because if you can control not only what fights are being made, but who owns the titles, you control everything, which is what the UFC has, and which is why Dana White has not been interested in promoting boxing for all these years. But now that he has a gigantic financial titan behind him, he might have enough money in terms of lawyers or lobbyists or what have you to, if not overturn the Ali Act, reduce it, gut it, do something, or maybe even just go against the Ali Act and just pay whatever fines or fees are associated with going against it. Because again, we live in a society where a lot of things can be solved by just having more money, more resources than your opponent. Crush them in the courts. It's common practice. So we're going to have to see, again, I don't necessarily think this is the best of news. I'm willing to hear it out. We've actually seen some kind of backtracking from the language being used here that, oh, well, we still want to work with people. We've even seen, again, Eddie Hearn talk about, hey, we're happy to work with Turki Al-Sheikh, but if you want to cut us out of the market, if you want us to go, out on our back, it's not happening. We're going to fight you if that happens, is essentially what he's been saying. But again, he's being nice because he still has a working relationship with Turki Al-Sheikh. But we're going to have to see how this plays out. But it is massive news and worth giving a lot of acknowledgement to. Let's move on here to some predictions. Sadly, I don't have the fancy things where they pop up as I say it, so spoiler alert, I guess, for my predictions. But apparently, Dwad Yordan is not healthy, not going to make it to the fight coming this Saturday against George Kambosos Jr. In steps in fellow Aussie, I believe. I think Jake Wyllie Jr., I believe is his full name. Let's see here. Yep, Jake Wyllie. Here he is against George Kambosos, and I'm picking Kambosos by decision. Now, again, I have a rule against picking anyone on short notice. Here's the thing, though. I was looking at some of Jake Wyllie's tape, and then I went and I looked at, okay, well, what was his last fight? I don't know anything about this guy. I know a lot of boxing. I don't think I've seen him. Maybe I've seen him on an undercard before, but I wasn't confident. He has a fight scheduled soon. He was already preparing for a fight coming in April. He already must have been in training camp. Plus, he's 24 years old. Look, I know if you look at his page, he was one loss by knockout, and it was to a fighter that was 0-2. I know that's a terrible, terrible look. But he's coming off of a good win against a guy with a good record. I think 24-1. He beat that guy. Again, I'm going off intangibles here, but there's an argument that George Kambosos has lost his last 4 fights. He lost to Lomachenko by knockout. He should have lost to Maxie Hughes 117-111. It's the clearest scorecard of all time. And he lost twice to Doheny. There's an argument he really hasn't won a fight since Teofimo Lopez. And even Teofimo Lopez with no lungs was again a split decision. Then you go back to the Lee Selby fight. That was a split decision. Arguably, he shouldn't have won that fight. And then you can go back even further to the Mickey Bay fight, which was also a split decision that he arguably didn't win. You're talking about, there's an argument that he should be 0-7 in his last 7 fights. His last real solid win was against Richard Pena in a 6-round knockout. It's insane for me that I can actually come on the show here and say there's an argument Kambosos lost his last 7. I really think that this kid, I think even if it's close, they're not going to give it to him on the cards, but he's 24 years old. Maybe inexperience gets to him and Kambosos is able to catch him late. I was floating maybe a Kambosos knockout in the 9th round. This is a 12-round bout, which is a little bit scary for someone so young and inexperienced. But again, he was preparing for a 10-round bout against a fellow pretty good record fighter. I'm going to go by decision here. Let's see what happens. I just can't trust George Kambosos to look good. Moving on, Sky Nicholson versus Tiara Brown. Great fight. Great fight. I think Tiara Brown is a really, really deserving title challenger here. I think she is a very good fighter. But I just think Sky Nicholson is the best in class in this division. If we're never going to have the Sky Nicholson versus Amanda Serrano fight, then Sky Nicholson's the best featherweight in the world, I think, by a bullet. Outclassed Raven Chapman, outclassed all of her opponents, stopped the girl that went a full distance with Michaela Mayer. Sky Nicholson, I think, is very, very good. I think Tiara Brown is going to have to fight a couple of things here. Obviously, Nicholson fighting in familiar waters. Tiara Brown, I just don't think has ever really been on this level. Now, look, there is one thing I'm going to highlight here. Tiara Brown has 11 knockouts. She almost has as many knockouts as Sky Nicholson does pro fights. But again, a lot of these fighters are so nondescript. I didn't go through the trouble of trying to memorize all this, but let me just read you some of these records. 22-17, 19-12, 7-5, 24-18 by majority decision, 17-28, 15-36. You know, the women's divisions are very, very top heavy. Big talents on the top. Again, I respect Tiara Brown's skills, but I don't think she's been tested enough. I think she needed one real solid test before this level, and I commend her for getting this opportunity. I've even seen a lot of people accusing Nicholson of ducking Tiara Brown. I don't think that there is an opportunity for women to really duck. There's just not enough elite names getting big paychecks in order to duck. So good on her. And then also on this card, look, this is actually a pretty decent card. I've been enjoying what Australian boxing has presenting recently. And here we have the rematch, Chernica Johnson versus Nina Hughes. Now, shout out to Lou DiBella, who I believe manages Nina Hughes here. Ultimately, I'm going to go with repeat. I'm going to go Chernica Johnson, again, by decision, unanimous decision. Last time out, there was that controversy with the scorecards that maybe Nina Hughes didn't do enough to win. I don't think she did. But ultimately, yeah, I'm going to go here, Chernica Johnson by decision. I think she's younger. I think quite a bit younger than her opponent. I'd love to double check that here. I don't typically like to do live fact checking, but I'm not going to make a talking point here unless I confirm it. So Chernica Johnson, 30 years old versus 42-year-old Nina Hughes. They've been out of the ring for almost a year. I know Nina Hughes has that amateur background, all of that, but Chernica Johnson, I just liked her hustle. I know that that's not the most technical analysis to bring forward here, but sometimes having a good old hustle is good enough to win. And I also think that Chernica Johnson, Sugar Neeks, I believe is her nickname, I think she's also quite a bit bigger. And I think size is going to play a lot in this fight. Rest of the card, Tera Moana, he's taking on a fighter by the name of, what is this here? James Singh. I don't rate that fighter at all. Tera Moana is just getting into the pro ranks. I think he's quite good. As one of the biggest Bakhtir Jalalov fans of all time, I think Tera Moana might have beat him in the Olympics. I don't know. You didn't hear me say that. But yeah, I'm expecting first round knockout, easy peasy. And Iman Kataev, who I wish he actually got a feature on this card here, but you know, he does get the little photo of him, but oh, there he is. Versus, yeah, Palacio. So Palacio just went 12 rounds with the one and only, your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. No, I'm joking. But Kevin Lele Sajo. And Kevin Lele Sajo is a huge puncher. And the fact that Palacio went 12 rounds with him is pretty impressive. But again, that's a super middleweight we're talking about here. I think Iman Kataev, a real Russian 9-for-9 knockout streak. Shades of Better Beef, might I say. I think he'll find the knockout late, but I think it will be late. I think KO 8 maybe is a little bit optimistic on my part. Might even be a knockout 9-10, but I think he finds it late. But Palacio, he's really durable. I think really good opponent for Kataev at this part in his career. Let's move on to an offering now by the PBC. We have Sebastian Fundora back in action, taking on Cordell Booker. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking about this fight. And yes, I'm picking him by knockout in the 9th round. So, hey, I'm doing the same thing that you guys do. But look, I know Cordell Booker was knocked out in 1 round by Amma Williams, but I've seen a lot of interviews by Booker. I've seen a lot of the problems that he's had in his personal life, and I think that this will be the best version of Cordell Booker. I believe he is on a 6 or 7 fight win streak since his one lone loss to Amma Williams. Not against the biggest names in the world, but again, confidence builders. I know Cordell Booker is one of those guys you'd hear rumors about that in the gyms, he was really putting it on people in sparring. He's got a pretty good amateur pedigree. Ultimately, I think Sebastian Fundora, too young, too much of a dynamic offensive dynamo. Look, I know the Tim Tszyu fight wasn't the best look in the world for either man, but you got to remember, Fundora is the guy that fought Erickson Lubin, who was on the comeback trail, and in the fight of a year, gutted out a knockout in the end. He's a good fighter. You have to give Sebastian Fundora more credit. A lot of people look at him for the Brian Mendoza loss and all this stuff, but I really rate Sebastian Fundora, I think, higher than what he is rated on average. I expect him to be in a good, fun, competitive fight until the end, where he's too much, his engine starts to get going. And again, Cordell Booker has never... You have to factor in the lanky factor. I think that's going to be something here on the show. Long and lanky, like... who was it that used to say that all the time? But beyond that, he's so long. He's 6'6" at 154 pounds. And if you've never... Who are you bringing in as a sparring partner to fight him? There's like 3 guys off the top of my head that can maybe kind of sort of emulate him. You have like the Fox brothers, and you have that guy who just beat Abdukakrov. Oh my God, I just butchered that because I don't remember it offhand. But there's like 3 people that are around this weight class that are that big. Unless you have one of them in your camp, I don't know who you're finding to spar. And I think Fundora is going to give him some angles he's never seen before. Give me Fundora, knockout in the 9th round. All right. Also on this card, Jesus Ramos Jr. with a very fast turnaround, taking on Guido Schramm. Look, Guido Schramm, I think at one point was an interesting contender, a fun Argentinian fighter. Ramos is going to destroy this guy. I'm saying TKO 4, but look, if it's knockout in the 2nd or the 3rd or even the 1st, I won't be surprised. I don't think Schramm has anything for Ramos Jr. If Schramm finds a way to win this, I think this is like upset of I don't even know how long. I give Schramm no chance. I've said no chance to fighters before that have found a way to pull it out, but I think Schramm, coming off of 2 back-to-back losses, including a knockout by Vladimir Hernandez, give me Ramos all day, all night. I don't think this is close, but hopefully it's fun before those 3 or 4 rounds I'm predicting are up. And then finally, Elijah Garcia, the 19 or 20-year-old. How young is he now? Because he's still quite young. The 21-year-old middleweight contender coming off of his first ever loss to Kyron Davis by split decision in a real shocker. I think he was a -1,000 favorite in that fight, taking on Terrell Gausha. And look, Terrell Gausha never been stopped before with 4 losses on that resume there. Ultimately, I'm going to go Garcia by UD. I know that he was coming off of some good knockouts. Again, Amilcar Vidal, we all remember that. We all remember the Jose Resendiz fight. Ultimately, I think Garcia coming off the loss, this is going to be more of a confidence builder. And Gausha is so durable, so tricky. He doesn't really throw any punches. He kind of just spends the whole fight against anyone good on the back foot. Defensively minded, looking for his spots, looking to find pockets to throw shots. I mean, we saw him drop Tim Tszyu, but again, after he dropped Tim Tszyu, he kind of did nothing in that fight. Give me Garcia by unanimous decision. And I think a sort of fun fight, but nothing too fight of the year worthy. And then finally, not as big as either one of these cards, but near and dear to my heart, Pro Box TV is back. Lester Martinez taking on Joe Sean James. And then, of course, the all-action superstar, the man that you need to watch each and every time he fights, Vladimir Hernandez taking on Isaias Lucero. Let's get to the main event here. I'm going to go with Joe Sean James as my underdog pick of the week. How do I preface this? Lester Martinez is the better fighter. Lester Martinez has the higher ceiling. Lester Martinez should win this fight, and I should pick him to win this fight. But I'm going with Joe Sean James by decision. This is about the 4th or 5th time this fight has been announced, if you've been keeping track. Lester Martinez has been out with injury on top of injury on top of injury. He has been injured so bad, I've heard, that he was even contemplating retirement several times. That's bad. That's a bad injury. That you're on the brink of retirement? I think Joe Sean James has been brought in as a B-side several times. They can't find a guy to really cleanly beat this guy. I think he's, again, long, lanky. I'm going to say that again. But he has got really good dimensions, I think, at 168 pounds here. And I'm going to just pick him to pick up a 6-4 kind of decision where he just lands the cleaner work. Martinez maybe isn't having the success he's normally accustomed to. And this is crazy for me to say. Again, I should not be doing this. This is going to age so poorly. I know it. Lester Martinez is coming off of beating Carlos Gongora. Like the same Gongora that gave all of those other world-ranked middleweights, a real bad night at the office. Carlos Gongora, who had 2 losses to Christian Mbili and Lerone Richards, and also had beat Ali Akhmedov. Carlos Gongora, a really, really good fighter, and he beat him clean. And here I am. I'm picking Joe Sean James. Look, if this ages poorly, it is what it is. I'm going out on a limb here, but I can't trust those injuries. I can't trust a guy that was on verge of retirement. That's bad. So ultimately, that's my pick here. Give me Lester Martinez to lose against Joe Sean James, even though I'm hoping for the opposite. I think Martinez has the higher ceiling. I rate the win over Carlos Gongora, but I'm going to pick James, man. Let's see what happens. Also, Vladimir Hernandez taking on Isaías Lucero. Lucero, another one of these Pro Box TV kind of opponents, if that makes sense to you at all. A Mexican, good record, 19-2, never been stopped before. But I got to ride with my guy, man. I got to ride with Vladimir Hernandez. I mean, come on. All Action Fighter for free on YouTube. If you don't watch this, you're just kicking yourself in your own foot because he's awesome. How do you not love Vladimir Hernandez? He always pulls off some kind of crazy upset. He's in all action fights. He beat the guy that Jesus Ramos Jr. is fighting this week, and he knocked him out cold in the 6th round, as I'm showcasing here. I'm going to say he continues this Cinderella run. I know he was in a really, really tough fight last time out. Had to go blood and guts war to, I think, catch a last-second knockdown that resulted in him getting like a majority decision. Am I recalling this at all correctly? Let's see here. His last fight, Raul Garcia, he ultimately wins by 1 round. Garcia down in rounds 5 and 8 to gut out that decision win. When he was knocked down in the 3rd round, looked like he was almost going to be knocked out. I know that 24K, Vladimir Hernandez here, 35 years of age. It's not the best for an action fighter, but I'm going to go on him. I'm going to pick him here. Also on this card, I know they're highlighting Yasmin Artiga versus Regina Chavez, but I mean, 8-4-3 fighter. Maybe she's better than I know. I'm not going to claim to have any expertise here. I imagine the girl who's 12-0-1 will win. Let's see. But I'm actually looking to highlight Louis Left Hook Coria is on this card, who is a very fun fighter. I enjoy him, and he's taking on Jesse Magdaleno. Now, I don't know if Jesse Magdaleno is the A-side in this fight. Of course, he is 23-9, but Jesse Magdaleno looks so undisciplined recently. Knocked out by Brandon Figueroa, completely outclassed and outboxed by Raymond Ford. I think that if there's odds on this for Louis Coria to be some kind of huge underdog, I kind of like him to win this fight. I really do. Sorry for that thing. But look, give me Louis Coria here. Also on this undercard, I have some more notes here. Anthony Cuba apparently is back. That's such a crazy turnaround. I mean, he's not fighting someone nearly on the level of his last opponent, but still, fun to see him back. Kelvin Davis is back on this card apparently. And also, Angel Rebolar, I think that's how you say his name. Oh my goodness, excuse me. He's taking on a 10-1 fighter named Charles Harris Jr. Look for that as another potential upset. Angel Rebolar, very good. I like his fights. I think he's quite a good fighter, even though he's got an 8-4 record. I think he's still only in his 20 or 21, 20 years old. And he's fought Charlie Sheehy to a decision, Anthony Cuba to a majority decision, Abdullah Mason to a decision, Kane Sandoval, who's another one of these TKO Hollywood Fight Nights fighters, to a decision. Never been stopped. Can pull off the occasional upset. He beat Omar Rosario in an upset. I think he could do it again. He beat Justin Cardona in an upset. Give me maybe Angel Rebolar has got another upset in him. So overall, guys, not to take too much more time, we're approaching an hour here. So thank you all for listening. Goodbye, and I will catch you all hopefully this time next week. Bye.